All right. Got another brother. JR isn't with us this week, but he'll be back next week. Got Brad, my brother Brad, different mothers, same father. And he's excited to share some of the stuff he's done with it. I'm excited to have Brad on. Brad, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you?
Oh, wow. Well, thanks for having me. I usually go into these things talking about my real estate, but I'm going to give the 30-second version of my real estate business. In ninth grade, I read a book on how to buy real estate with no money down. In 2002, an investor bought my neighbor's house in Vienna. And from that point on, I decided I was going to do real estate. I was going to flip houses. It took me 8 months to find my first deal. And I didn't quit. I never quit. And here we are, 4,000 deals later. And that company still operates a couple hundred flips a year. And I work about an hour a week in it. And it allows me to focus on my true passion and why God put me here. And that's to help people find freedom and joy and happiness by reversing the childhood programming that so many of us unfortunately grew up with. So a couple of years ago, trying to get my son help for anxiety, I was on a call like this, and the lady was like, "You have a tic." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You blink profusely when you talk about your childhood. You may have some unresolved childhood trauma that's affecting your son's anxiety. Do you want to come work with myself and my husband?" I said, "Sure." Flew out to Park City, and in a weekend, really in a 3-hour session, Ray, my life forever changed. And so I started researching. I started talking to people, and they're like, "Wow, you're really good at this." And then I started getting formally trained, and here we are 2 years later, and I've helped close to 100 people now, like radically transform their lives.
I love that, man. You would think, as we talked about before the call, that you haven't done all those deals and made all that money and had the team and worked a week of a life. You'd go out and just be boating, playing golf, getting swole in the workouts, and you'd be happy and fulfilled. Talk to me about that when you had that realization of like, all right, I've made all this money and I thought that this was going to bring me joy and fulfillment. And at the soul level, wasn't doing that. At least that's what it sounds like outside listening in.
Well, here's the funny thing, man. I wasn't searching for anything because I didn't know that anything was wrong. So what? I smoked weed every night for years. So what if I got hammered drunk when I was in a tournament because I was nervous? Other people were drinking. Two marriages that didn't work out. It was their fault. $9 million worth of business mistakes. Over 5 mistakes. Well, people make mistakes. I kind of discounted it all. So you're someone sitting here listening to this right now thinking, "No, I got everything together. It's just the outside world, right?" What I realized is that I did have issues, and there was nothing external that could bring me peace or joy. It was all inside. So what has shifted for me, Ray, is that sometimes I think to myself, like, I'm in a position where I don't have to show up to an office. I could go kite surfing every day. I could go wake surfing. I could travel. But I'm choosing to do this work over that because it is so meaningful to me. And I felt like I was given a gift that weekend in Park City that forever changed my life and my relationships and my health and my business. And I feel obligated to some degree to give that back. So no, I wasn't fulfilled. You know, I've said this to so many people. I could right now go to your hometown and grab a beach umbrella and sit there 8 hours a day, probably for the next 20 years, and read books on psychology and the brain and neuroscience and never get bored. If you'd asked me to do that with real estate, probably like 2 hours in, I've been like, or 10 minutes in, I've been like, I'm out.
I love that. No, I love that transition. For our audience, a lot of them, I'd love to, share your feedback. We built different models throughout here. One of them being generally, unless there's some kind of trauma, guys like that we talk to, highly successful in certain areas, or they made a lot of money, done one thing or the other. And I was talking to a close personal friend of mine this morning. Until some kind of trauma happens, whether it's cancer, divorce, or loss of money somewhere, a car accident for me, and a hurricane, some kind of trauma then forces these questions. And I'd love to be in a perfect world where we don't need the trauma, but guys like us tend to want what I call the freight train. They tend to want to get hit by the freight train before they start to ask new questions. What has been your experience around that? Because like once guys make money or they become successful in the world's eyes, there's really something else still missing, at least at the soul level. The ones that keep asking questions and are looking for fulfillment, maybe they might not know it spiritually, they're looking for fulfillment, but I'm just calling it that. But the soul knows that there's more. Talk to me about that. What's been your experience working with guys and ladies on that?
So it's not so much about trauma brings change, massive change either comes from inspiration or desperation. So in your case, it was inspiration, right? In my case, wow, it wasn't desperation, because I certainly wasn't desperate. It was inspiration. I didn't know for 47 years that I lack self-love. And that's one of the reasons I created that quiz at bradchandler.com/quiz that you can take in like 3 minutes to see your level of self-love. So I didn't know that I lack self-love. When you lack self-love, Ray, it usually always comes down to some degree of I don't feel enough. When you don't feel enough, you try to fill that void by things outside of yourself, whether it's money, sex, porn, alcohol, food, I mean, travel, shopping. We could go on for hours, right? But here's the thing, when you don't feel enough, it is never enough. Look at Michael Jackson. Look at Prince. Look at Amy Winehouse. Look at Kurt Cobain. I mean, we could spend hours on this too, right? These people had more, Whitney Houston. These people had more money than they knew what to do with, but they're dead. And most of them took their own lives because they were so desperate. Why were they desperate? Why were they depressed? Because they lacked self-love. They didn't feel enough. So it didn't matter how much they got. And none of this was their fault. None of it is your fault. If you're sitting there thinking, I'm a shitty father, I'm a shitty business owner, I'm a shitty husband, whatever it is, it's not your fault, because all of this is wrapped up in stuff that you went through as a child where your brain gave you this coping mechanism. Usually it's this thing is happening to me. This bad thing is happening to me because I'm bad. That's what happened to me. And that's what happens to everyone that I see. To some degree, it's I am bad, I am not enough. So yeah, to answer your question, man, when you don't feel enough, you can keep searching outside yourself. You're never going to find peace and a connection to your soul.
Yeah, on that presentation I gave, it was Kanye West. He's like, what do you do when the Jesus piece doesn't bring you peace? Very similar to what you're saying, that the external world, if you don't feel that self-love on the inside, there's no amount of things you could do or try to improve yourself. Like a lot of us, I feel, try and improve our worth, try and improve our sense of that, because, and I agree, at the core of it is a lack of self-love. I mean, as simple as that sounds, I true honestly feel that if we could boil it down to like one commandment, if someone will allow me to be that bold to say that, it would be to self-love, to love yourself. Because if you learn how to love yourself and you can learn to do that, then you can learn to love another. But you can't give that to somebody else, at least in my opinion, that which you're not willing to receive for yourself. I can't love another if I don't love myself to that level. What are your thoughts?
100%. If I asked you, can you give me 12 oranges right now, and you didn't have them, could you give them to me? Right. So you're listening to this and you're like, self-love, I'm going to check out right now because I have self-love. Well, that was me 3 years ago. If I would have been listening to this very podcast, I'd have been like, I'm out of here. This is silly, this self-love stuff. You can go, you can tune out right now, but you can continue living the life that you're living. Do you have deeply connected relationships, or are you in a bad relationship and you've gone from one to the next? Do you need substances to cope? Addicted to anything? So if you want to embrace this concept of self-love, push aside the, oh, this is woo-woo, because it's not woo-woo at all. Look, we're two testaments, right? We both made a lot of money. We were both successful from a financial standpoint, but yet we were unfilled. And I don't know about you, but I had bad relationship after bad relationship. I put destructive things in my body, alcohol and weed. I would get high and go eat, 15 or 10 Reese's Pieces, the miniature ones, but it's still a lot, right? How did everything change in my life? I found self-love 2.5 years ago in an Airbnb bedroom outside of Park City, Utah. Since then, Ray, everything in my life has changed. I'm in an amazing relationship of 13 months. My kids' anxiety has gone away. My relationship with my kids has improved. My business is running without me profitably. My net worth has grown more in these last 2.5 years by an exponential, a 2x factor than any other time before. I'm healthier than I've ever been. I test 83 health markers every 90 days. 79 of them are in the ideal range. 4 of them are in the not bad, but if it's green, yellow, red, it's yellow. I just need to get them up a little bit, and I'm working hard. So look, guys, everything in my life changed when I realized that I was enough and I had self-love. And if you have children, I believe the greatest gift that you can ever give a child is to help them break out of this multi-generational curse that most of us are involved in. Your parents didn't wake up and say, I'm going to screw you up. They did the best they could. They gave you the most love they could, but it wasn't enough. They didn't know how to give you what you needed. So therefore, you went out and found someone else to partner with who lacks self-love. And then if you have offspring, they lack self-love. They're just going to repeat the pattern over and over and over again. So how do you stop this pattern? You teach them how to love themselves unconditionally. How can you teach a child to love themselves unconditionally if you don't love yourself unconditionally? The answer is you can't. So if your kids have issues, just go grab your spouse, walk into the bathroom and look in the mirror if you want to know where it comes from. And that's not an indictment on you at all, just the opposite. It's not your fault. First step to change is you've got to be aware. I had no awareness 3 years ago, and now I do.
Let's talk about that. I love what you were saying there. Kind of what I wrote down as you were talking was broken people can only create broken people. And they don't mean that on purpose. They're doing the best they can. If they don't know they're broken, all they can do is make a copy. Right. So, and they go around the world unconsciously broken. So that's just kind of the way the world is. And then everybody around them is the same way. Right. So, and I love what you said about unconditional love, because you know, I think even the broken person knows how to love, but there's a difference between unconditional love, unconditionally loving the self, and just loving the self. They're two worlds different. So talk about that, and then also share a little bit about how can we get guys and ladies start to begin the process of awareness and then to love themselves unconditionally.
Love with like narcissism or I'm better than you. I have an extreme amount of self-love, but I don't think I'm any better than anybody. But on the flip side, nor do I think I'm any worse than anybody. And for 47 years, I did think I was worse than other people. And I had to prove myself through money. We can talk about that in a bit, kind of my issues with money growing up and how they've, gotten better, but still have some issues around money. Look, how do people have self-love? How do they change everything? They start by figuring out if they have self-love or not. It's the same thing for everybody. It is, you've got to go back to your childhood and figure out the times where you felt a stressful time, traumatic event, times where you felt like there was no control for you. Your control was taken away. And I promise you, you came up with stories around those events. Those stories had something to do with why they're happening to you. And they have to be around something to do with, I deserve this. I'm not good enough. This is happening to me for a reason. Because why? It's your brain giving you the ability to survive and have a better day. Because if I'm bad, all I've got to do is be good. And then I can get the love from my father or my mother, or my dad will stop being gone or not showing up to my baseball games, right? It gives you a better hope for tomorrow. So it's great as a 6-year-old, as a 46-year-old, as a 47-year-old. We'll use me as an example, who's never owned a boat in his life and is going to buy a 42-foot boat and sail and take it to the Bahamas when he doesn't even know how to read a chart is not good. It turned out okay, but it's not good. I could have died. It wasn't, I woke up and said, I'm no good. I need to prove myself. My subconscious mind was screaming at me that, hey, if you get this boat and you can put all these pictures and the pretty ladies on there and show up in the Bahamas, like, people might think you're something. So halfway through that trip, I went through my transformation. I realized why I had done that. So I flew to Florida. I'd quit marijuana and I brought my boat back because now I have awareness. You rewrite your story. Whatever it is that you don't like now, because you have the awareness and you have the self-love, you get to rewrite whatever you want. I am living the life of my dreams every day, Ray. I wake up, I have a business that provides me income in real estate. I get to do every single day what I love to do, and that's transform people's lives by showing them how their childhood programming has caused them misery and suffering in their life, and how in a matter of hours they can change it all.
I love that. So step 1 is awareness. Step 2 is something like reprogram that. It sounds like to reprogram that story, and then tell the story you want to tell. That's what it sounds like summed up.
Yeah.
Maybe you got a better way of summing it up.
No, so it's realize, recode, and rewrite. You get to reconnect with yourself and rewrite. It's almost like having a virus in a computer. Have you ever gotten a virus in a computer? Yeah. You got to know the virus is there. And then you rewrite, you recode the virus out, and then boom, you get to move on and reconnect with yourself. Because at the essence, at the crux of all of this is every single problem in your life is a thinking problem. That thinking problem wasn't a problem at 6 years old, but it is as an adult. That thinking problem was created from childhood trauma that leads to lack of self-love. That thinking problem, I'm bad, something bad is happening to me, is when you lose connection with yourself. So as a kid, you have two primary attachments. You have two primary needs, attachment and authenticity. Attachment means if you're not with a parent, you're going to die. That's how human beings work. They need to be there. It's not like other species where they can take care of themselves. So you have this attachment and you have this authenticity. Authenticity is a connection with yourself, the ability to feel your feelings, express your feelings. Most of us as kids couldn't express our feelings. Our parents couldn't handle it. So we couldn't give up. We couldn't be our authentic selves because that would mean that we would threaten the attachment. So we gave up the authenticity part, which means we got disconnected from ourselves. So all of this, by finding self-love within you, you're reconnecting to yourself. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to be brought back to your essence of who you were born to be and were and are still inside.
So it sounds like in a lot of things we bring up throughout our podcast, it really sounds it's about remembering your truth, about remembering your true connection, remembering who you really are. The moment you said, hey, you know what? In order to have attachment, I need to let go. I can't be my true authentic self, which is kind of an ideally perfect world. You like to keep your true authentic self and have the attachment, right? But what happens is, hey, they expect you to show up a certain way. You're like, look, they can't handle me being this way. So I let go of that. I let go authenticity. So now I become inauthentic. I'm living my false self. Some people call it the ego, whatever you want to call it. I live this false self, right? And I forget that that's who I am, my true being, my true core, my true rest. This is the child of God, whatever you want to call it. It goes by a bunch of names, but so it's almost like remembering this is who you really are, not this illusion you made up so that you would get approval or would get whatever it is you wanted. And then ultimately what happens is most of us live that life of believing we're that other thing, I call it the ego, but that we're this person we made up, but we forget that who we really are at the core of it, without needing anybody else's approval, that we are worthy of love, that for just being here, we're worthy of that. We don't need to earn self-love. That was a huge one for me when I realized, wow, I don't have to earn self-love. That was a huge realization, man.
Yeah, we're human beings just by being, just by getting here was a miracle, right? A sperm had to meet with an egg, like the chances of that. And I mean, going from that little connection to a human being who are now talking and walking and have, miles of blood vessels and trillions of cells in our body. It's insane. It's like you already are a miracle. Just love yourself for being.
Almost, and then, take it a step deeper. Also learning to accept the love, right? Like, because obviously if you don't love yourself, you can't accept external love. But wow, like one of the second relations I had in meditation, the one I had, that first one of I don't need to earn self-love. The second one was, what if I learned to love myself the way God loves me? The way I'm loved by that eternal, intelligent, beautiful love. Like if I learn to love myself that way and see myself in that way, like if I could see myself the way I see my children, but the way an unconditional love sees it, right? Because even with my children, sometimes I love them, but I can nitpick some things, as I'm sure you can. Hey, you know what? This over here, right? But the way our Father sees us, right? Their infinite intelligence, like they don't see any of that. They just see pure beauty, pure bliss, he marvels at us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They
Yeah.
see love. That's all we really are, right?
Yeah. At the core. Yeah. At that true self. Yeah. No, I love that. Talk to me about, and some of these guys, about the money piece. What do you see as you work with different guys, and also from your own personal experience? I'm sure you see some recurring themes, because I see them in kind of the guys I talk to and work with. There's this belief that, at least in the guys I work with, that I'll take a stab at it, that the money or this external thing is actually going to prove my sense of self-worth. And then there's an attachment to the balance sheet, the business, whatever it is, there's an attachment to it, and then that becomes their identity. And when something happens, which inevitably is going to happen because everything changes, right? Just life happens, right? You get through different seasons and nothing stays constant. Wow. Then it's a ding on them personally, on who they are, because they're identified with it. They're not identified as a child of God and pure self-love, right? That's not who I identify with. So talk to me if that's something you're seeing in the guys and ladies you work with, or is it something a little bit different?
No, it's spot on, but I'm going to use me because I think I'm a good example as anyone. Yeah, I can remember before I went through this transformation that I would be the guy singing and dancing around the gym maybe not the singing part, but the dancing part, when I was having a good business, I
Were
felt
you a
confident.
Biggie or Tupac kind of guy?
I like, but I like them both. I like all kinds of music. Just about. So yeah, I literally like both those guys. Love both those guys. So I'm dancing around the gym because I felt probably I'm making a lot of money. I have self-confidence. I'm better than the other person. So if they judge me, I don't care. But the funny thing is, when I was having bad months, I didn't feel comfortable because my self-image, my self-worth was way lower when I wasn't making money. Yeah, I mean, I spent 47 years, those 5 business mistakes that I made that cost me $9 million, they were all trying to chase my worth. They were all trying to prove something, right? There were these silly mistakes I took or these silly lawsuits I got us into. I didn't get us. Well, I kind of did. It was all about proving myself. So recently, we use hypnosis as a tool to heal. And why I think hypnosis is one of the best tools on the planet is because all of these programming issues that I was telling you about, they're usually in your subconscious mind. And that's why therapy doesn't always work in marriage counseling, because they want to focus on the conscious mind, which is only responsible for 5% of your daily behavior. 95% of your behavior is driven by the subconscious mind. So we use hypnosis. And my partner was last week taking me through the beginning part of hypnosis, where we just kind of prepare and asking questions about money, because I still have anxiety around money. And I shouldn't, because I've got enough. I've got enough to where the things that are causing me the anxiety shouldn't. So she started asking me a bunch of questions, really great questions. And one of the things that I came to is that when I was 10 and my parents got divorced and my dad left, he didn't support us financially for a period. And my mom said that we may have to move into public housing. And I had been in that public housing before with her because she was a nurse. And I remember that there were shootings. So I think my 10-year-old brain thought, when you don't have money, you lose your house and you go to public housing and you might get shot. So my developing brain, I said, money equals safety. Without money, you may die. And that was programmed into me. Maybe that's why at one given time I owned 180 houses, because I didn't want to be without a house, because maybe I associated a house with safety. So fast forward all these years, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between yesterday and 30 years ago. So I believe there's a part of my brain that still feels that without money, I can die, literally die. So sometimes when I go to spend money, I get anxiety. It's all unconscious. Why am I feeling this? Why do, if I go to order takeout from my family, sometimes I feel anxious. It's not my fault. And certainly you can judge me. Someone will out there, but it's fine. It's not my fault. That's what was programmed in. I thought to myself, oh my God, I might die. If we go into that public housing, I might die. I'm not unlike anyone else. I mean, just different variations of the money. So my dad showed his love through money. So yeah, I'm working through this. I've come a long way since I found my self-worth. I know that I don't have to prove. So I've gotten way better at that, but I haven't completely kicked the money equals safety and security.
Well, I'm right
But
there
I
with you.
will.
So yeah, I'm sure you will. And I'm no one to judge, because I've got the same issues. I still feel anxiety around some simple things too, and things that we know we can afford, going out to eat, things like that, where probably some similar things. I've got to dig deep into kind of what happened there. And I love also what you're saying about it not being my fault, because at that point there's a sense of like almost it's not just an impersonalization, but also like an innocence to it, because as that child, as that true self, authentic self, you are innocent. You were born innocent, right? Oh, or you can't judge somebody else, right? Because when you judge somebody else, it's really something inside yourself that you're projecting outward. So right, right. What is that? Don't cast that first stone. You know what I mean? Like, why would you do that, right? So you live in a glass house, right? So a lot of the guys I talk to have that fear, and some of them, I just want to like, dude, if anything, commend you like for the vulnerability and the open share, because for me that comes up still too. And logically, there isn't like a reason for that to come up. We've got more enough money to do that, but it still comes up emotionally, and it still hooks me. Like it still does. Like is it getting better and better? Is there more? Do I have some more tools where I can breathe through this stuff and I can calm myself down? Yeah, sometimes, and sometimes I just I run with the program, right? Sometimes the program just hooks me, right? So I love what you were saying, really, about that. It's not your fault, because it isn't. you're innocent in the process.
Yeah, you're innocent, as Mark Mincola says in Way of Miracles, a fabulous book. I'm getting him on my podcast next week. If you like
Awesome.
this type of stuff, I have a podcast called How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. But he said, get a little, if you lack self-love, get a picture of your 6-year-old self. And every time you look at that little picture, think the 2 words, innocent and deserving. You are innocent and you're deserving of love and attention and affection that, a lot of us didn't get. So yes, sometimes back to the money thing, Ray, it probably only happens 2% of the time, 3% of the time now, but I actually will go in a restaurant, look at a menu and make a decision based on the price. Like, oh, this steak is, $99 and this one's $79. I don't need the $99 one.
Right.
But
There's a worthiness
knowing
issue there
that,
too. I do the same thing
there,
too.
yes, as I was saying that, I thought about that. But as I know that now, I am conscious and I like push myself. I went to SDK Steakhouse. I was alone just because I flew out alone. I spoke at a meals event and then was on Steve Trank's podcast last week. I went to STK Steakhouse and I don't know, I got the filet, when you put a lobster tail on, it's always more. So it was like, I don't know what it was, 99, $129. And the mashed potatoes were $19. And I had heartache for a second, but I'm like, all of the sides were $19. So knowing it, it's like I push myself now. Like I'm good. I left the hotel room the other day. I stayed 4 nights at this kind of crappy Hampton Inn, and I had 20s and 100, pushing myself to give more in the face of the more that I do this, the more I'm going to show you have enough money, your abundance. God has always provided for you. And the more that you give, the more you're going to receive.
I love that. And these little pieces try and give a little more. My wife pushes me in those ways. So I'm grateful to have her as a partner where like, she's like, no, like, and I'll resist, I'll clinch, I'll hold on to it, trying to squeeze a booger out of George Washington's nose, all the quarters, that's how tight I hold on to them sometimes. But yeah,
it's not your fault, right?
No, agreed. No, it's definitely liberating to know it's not your fault, and empowering too, in that, hey, you can train it like a muscle, like you and I would do any muscle, right? Like you said, reprogram the story, rewrite the story, know it's not your truth, and then live into the new story you want to live in.
Ray, I've had multiple clients who in their 40s and 50s and 60s are financially set, and they work their asses off at the expense of relationships, intimate relationships, family relationships, right? Those guys have told me that they don't need to work anymore. Why are they still working? They're working because they need to prove something. It doesn't matter if they have enough money to live. Marissa Peer, one of my mentors, says she's never met a workaholic that didn't have self-esteem issues. If you're working like crazy and you work how you do at the expense of relationships, you likely have self-esteem issues, AKA lack of self-love. I promise you, if you lack self-love, it's not just in your work and relationships that's suffering. It's every single area of your life. And when you just live in the truth that you are enough and do the work, everything changes for the better in like a profound way.
Yeah, I love what you said about that, because like never met a workaholic that has self-esteem issues, because and I love what you said too. I almost kind of wrote down like a core, and then if that's a core problem, it spreads itself outward, and yeah, it's going to touch your relationships, and usually the marriage, the one with the kids, which can cause you the most pain, can cause that entrepreneur the most pain, right? Because now it's a divorce, now it's an affair, whatever that is. At that point, you look for that thinking that you still need to prove yourself, and then you keep working for the sake of working to try and prove yourself. Like and your guys, like the workaholics, they're not working 40, 30 hours a week. They're working 70, they're clocking hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, speaking of infidelity, why would anyone ever cheat on their spouse? Because number one, they're hurt. You would never, ever hurt your spouse that way, because I got a touch of this at the end of my first marriage. And it was really, really, really painful. And I said to myself, wow, I'll never do that based on the pain. So you can only hurt someone if you're hurt. And the second thing is you're looking for validation because you don't feel enough. Well, if this woman will have sex with me or this man will have sex with me, it has nothing to do with the sex at all. It has to do with how you feel about yourself. And this is a crazy thing. This is why you and I do what we do. We look around and we realize that this simple thing, this lack of self-love, is the cause of 99 of every problem in the world. But how much do you ever hear about that?
No.
33% of Americans are on an antidepressant or anti-anxiety drug. 70% of Americans are on at least one prescription drug. And like some ridiculous thing are on two, like 55 or 60% are on two. You learn self-love. You don't need antidepressants. You don't need anti-anxiety. And you probably don't need your prescription drug. And someone's like, well, I have psoriasis, or I have Parkinson, I have MS. Well, guess what that's caused from? Stress from your childhood. Mark Mincola, who I referenced earlier, says that self-contempt is the biggest killer of people, and self-contempt is the opposite of self-love. He says self-contempt leads to dis-ease, no ease in the body, and dis-ease leads to disease. And that's why we have 70% of Americans on prescription medication, because they lack self-love, and their childhood programming is still haunting them as adults.
Yeah, kind of when you said that, really, I felt like you're judging the self, you're criticizing the self, which then leads to all these other diseases, right? Because as long as you're judging your own self, and kind of wrapping up, what I'd like to wrap up with is, what are some practices we can leave our listeners with that would embody, would be, and I like that word, practices that would, well, let me back up a second before the self-love thing. You and I got to self-love independently, meaning you went through your own journey, I went through mine, and we both ended up at the same place, right? Like that, we didn't like coordinate to say it was self-love. We just kind of like, through our own prayer, meditation, spiritual practices, whatever it is that you practice, it just became really clear to me that that was at the core of it. What are some of the practices that you do to embody, to live self-love, to share self-love? Because once you have love, you just want to share it. So kind of give our listeners, and what practices do you recommend, and if you would even call it a practice?
Yeah. So I put together a webpage for your listeners, bradchandler.com/start. That's just indicative of starting this journey that will forever change your life. And on that, there's a morning meditation, a nighttime meditation. So that would be number one. Start with meditation, because you can learn so much in meditation, and we could do a 24-hour show on the benefits of meditation, because they're absolutely endless. They really are. The second thing is, it's got the self-love quiz on there. So take that, because you can't change anything without awareness. Another tool on there, it's got a bunch of great podcasts by Andrew Huberman on how alcohol and weed and food, nicotine and tobacco affects your body and your health. But it's got a tool on there that can forever change your relationships in your life. It's something I came up with called the Joy Regenerator. My partner and I came up with it. And it is, when you feel this negative emotion, you are in a fight or flight. So it's a basic tool. It's not basic at all. It's an amazing tool, so that anytime you feel this negative emotion, there's a process that I lead you through. And we don't have time to go through the whole process, but if you download it, it's completely free. I'll email you a video that explains how to use it. And the 30-second version is, you identify the emotion, and by identifying the emotion, you've got to think about what it is, and that kick, fight, or flight. And then you give yourself compassion for that emotion. I'm feeling sad. It's okay, Brad, you're feeling sad. And then I start to think of some grateful things around the situation. And then I ask, where could this be coming from? Well, anytime I feel a negative emotion, it goes back to that feeling in childhood that I'm not enough. So I go to because you have a thought that creates an emotion or a feeling that creates an action, and that action usually reinforces the original thought. So I'm feeling sad. It came from the original thought that I'm not enough. But I ask myself, is it true that I'm not enough? No. So what used to take me days, Ray, and a trigger, now takes me seconds, and boom, I'm right back to my joy. So go to that page, and there's, like I said, there's 5 different monumental tools on there, but meditation, awareness, and then processing your emotions. So many of us, our whole lives, have felt a negative emotion and run to booze or sex or work. That doesn't work. You've got to sit with your emotions. You got to process them. You got to have compassion for them.
I love it. I mean, these are a lot of the same tools. We'll preach, and I'll link an episode. We just kind of gave an episode a whole lot of tools, but some of the tools we shared too were meditation, and then I covered how meditation is a tool to build awareness. In meditation, what you're doing is becoming aware of those thoughts. Because if you don't have it's almost like meditation. I kind of phrase it to, It's kind of like a bicep curl for your awareness. It's a tool to build the muscle of awareness. And then I love what you said about the joy regeneration. So it's in essence, I wrote down here, it's where you kind of process the emotions. You sit with the emotions, you embrace the emotions, and then you release it. You forgive yourself. There's a compassion piece. If you try and drink the emotion or eat the emotion or smoke the emotion, like none of that works. Like it doesn't work long term.
Temporarily it does.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
temporarily it'll give you relief.
it'll give you temporary relief at the cost of lasting pain, because when it comes back way worse. Like I always talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, how does it feel after? If after doesn't feel good, probably wasn't a good choice, you know? And then I love what you said, questioning the thought, like I learned that from the work of Byron Katie. I don't know if that's who you're using with this work here, but is it true? How do I know that it's true? Can I be absolutely sure that it's true? And you write these things out. I mean, Byron Katie's work, as quote unquote simple as it is, it's profound. All right, Brad, I really appreciate you being on here. Thank you for your wisdom and your vulnerability. More important, man, you could be anywhere else in the world doing whatever you want, so I'm grateful that you're here with our people doing this. Is there anything you'd like to leave them with, my brother?
Yeah, man, thank you for having us. Look, if you're suffering or struggling in relationships, with addiction, with eating too much, depression, anxiety, I promise you there's a better way. I went to 3 decades of therapy and marriage counseling and didn't work at all. In 3 hours, everything changed in my life. You don't deserve to suffer. You don't deserve to struggle, despite what you may be telling yourself. There's nothing wrong with you. At your essence, you're a beautiful human being. When you can start believing that, everything in your life will change. Your relationships will change. Your financial status will change. Freedom. You can get freedom to be your authentic self instead of hiding behind this mask that you have your whole life. So just know that no matter where you are, how dark it could possibly be, there is light and there's a better way. So if I can help you or Ray can help you, man, reach out to us. Reach out to us, because there's a better way and you deserve it.
I love that you're worthy of that better way. And I love what you said now as you were saying it, that freedom only exists in that true self. There is no freedom in that ego. That ego will never create freedom. It's a
Never.
trap. So
If you think money will bring you freedom, it's just another untruth you're telling yourself.
no, nothing in the external is going to bring you freedom. It's only an internal realization of your truth, of the truth. It's got to become an internalized truth for you, of that true self. Then you're free. And it's funny, freedom is nothing about the external. It's all internal.
Yep. Amen.
All right, my brother. Appreciate you.